about to hear Peter and Dylan presenting their works, their collaborative works that they have been doing during these past 20 weeks, I guess. And so maybe you can, Peter, you can start now if you'd like. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. And we should continue this in the future. Thank you.
I keep on staying now, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very happy that that Dylan and I are able to present some of the work that we've been doing over the last weeks. Some of you may have heard the lecture I gave with Dieter Muck a couple of days ago about also about oboe technique and about different things and about how important it is if you're writing a piece. It's great, of course, to be able to have some kind of a publication that you can use, but that really, although I'm very glad that people have used my book in the past, I'm always I always stress the need and for composers also to either work directly with players or indeed maybe to grab the instrument they're writing for in their own hands and to look into what the difficulties are. And I have often talked about this in many different places and with many people. And the work with Dylan, I found absolutely.
It seems like we lost Peter for a second.
So I can pick up from where Peter left off. Yeah, with the events happening in the world in March, we were able to connect because the Arts Council in New Zealand was quite generous, and they knew that things were quite difficult, so they had a generous fund to help connect people, international people to New Zealanders. So I was able to. I'd known Peter for a while, but I had been in touch about this collaboration, and so he mentioned that his book it acts as a just a starting point, a template to begin for composers. And because I wasn't able to meet anybody during this time, I actually decided to hire an oboe myself. And apart from the fact that I learn much better with tactile means, I was able to take the fingerings in the book and actually spend a lot more time listening to the content of what's possible, and rather than if you have interaction with a performer, it can be quite a short-lived experience where you don't actually get the subtlety and the intricacies of what's inside, what's possible. And so with the fingerings, I tried them all myself, and I was able to develop like a chain of finger patterns where I was manipulating different fingers, and that gave a pitch context that I was able to build the harmonic world of the duo around. So the duo is oboe and viola.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
From work, is it completely different the way that you work with Peter this time, and the way that you used to work before? You said you were actually kind of like trying out some of these techniques yourself. Has it changed any perspective for you as a composer?
Yeah, well, I'd been tending to work this way anyway, because I wanted to get inside the interior of instrumental sounds, and discover like these little precious artifacts that you actually you don't pick up from like an interaction with an hour with somebody. So I've spent hours really with the oboe. So that has changed. I actually, the piece that I wrote previously 2 years ago, I'd done this, also hired an oboe, but I hadn't. I think that the situation in the world has forced my hand to do things myself. So previously I would do a little bit of improvising and playing around, and then give it all over to Peter. But this time I was transcribing a lot of initially transcribing a lot of improvising on the instrument. So that is a different way that I've been forced to work with.
But if correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that the composers in the older time, they all have to kind of learn different instruments and try these kind of things on when they're writing their pieces as well. And do you think that there's any kind of change with those circumstances? Or is your experience this time because of the limitation of, it's not the limitation of communication even, because you can still communicate, but the idea of the time of being in lockdown actually sort of like create new reality for you to approach the same way of working in a different light?
Yeah, well, that is interesting. I think, like Baroque music, for example, is able to, you can transfer the cello suites to any instrument, and the effect is the same. So I think the developments through 20th century and into now is isolating sound much more, and instrumental technique plays a much bigger part in the parameters of music than it did pre-20th century. So the breakdown was during this time was more about presence, which it was interesting hearing Dieter talk briefly. I didn't hear the beginning, but I don't know if other people have had this experience during this time, but I've been questioning time quite often and my own sanity. There's an interruption of routine, and the rhythm of life is basically paused. So with this piece, because I didn't actually have access to the presence of being with somebody else, it did feel unreal in many ways, actually.
So you mentioned the idea of pause in terms of time, and how does this affect your work as a composer? Because it's time flow differently from your normal ways of writing music, and this time it's a bit of kind of a big breath in the middle of life. So how did it affect you?
Well, for me, I usually work better from the afternoon into the night, because I find the morning my imagination is not really functioning. So, and then I would have a routine in the morning normally of meeting other people. I think this experience has made the days seem like the time of a day kind of fluctuates for me a lot now. But my life is almost back to normal here, but during those 4 months, it was difficult to assign the normal sort of working process, I think. Oh, here he is.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
No.
I'm not sure what happened, but I'm back.
Good. So we were just talking about the difference that made Dylan working process quite different from the normal time that he had, the idea of pause that happened during the last few weeks in terms of like how we perceive time as composers, that is a bit different from usual. Yeah, so
Yeah.
anything to add about the collaboration? Has it, because I'm sure you've been doing all this kind of collaboration, intercontinental collaboration for a while already, but what changed? What changed? What
Yeah.
was different this time?
Yeah, I think the big difference is firstly perhaps during this period of knowing, okay, there each person has actually more time than maybe they usually did, but actually if I look back on it in other years, even with a full schedule, this kind of work is always possible. Of course, it's sometimes a little bit the 10 hours time difference between working with Dylan was an issue at times as to working out when it's the best time that we can work and I can still play the oboe at that time of day without disturbing anybody, issues like that. But also looking at, okay, some of the sounds we're dealing with are extremely delicate. Maybe I should send you a sound file of what they sound like, not only through the microphone of where I'm playing it, but on recorded on a good recording device and sending that. That's also something that I've noticed teaching my students as well. Delicate pieces, some things need to be listened to in it. Many things can be solved online, but not everything. But this special collaboration I thought was wonderful. It happened to be between also New Zealand and Germany, which I thought was wonderful, and also came in a way. Dylan and I were collaborating about piece and thinking about in what kind of a form could it be presented, and because obviously international travel is not going to happen probably for quite some time, and the lockdown tapes we had been doing with Ensemble Musikfabrik were also kind of a, Dylan had been really pleased about hearing those and thought that would be a wonderful way to be able to present the piece. And yeah, so we were trying out all these fine sounds and thinking about, okay, we could present this piece as a premiere online as a lockdown tape. So not only as a tape just to listen to, but really it will be a, when it's done, it will be broadcast as the world premiere of the piece. My colleague Axel and I, of course, will be in the same studio, which I stress at this time, our level of technology, of course, allows us to play with click tracks with people anywhere. But for the kind of music making that I really like to always do, that doesn't really, it satisfies me with a certain kind of piece, but it is very limiting as to the kind of natural, spontaneous music making that makes music what it is. So, and I'm looking forward to Axel, and I'm going to Paris today, and we'll be working with my colleague Axel on Dylan's piece these next days. And I hope we also will be able to hook up with Dylan these next days, working with him. Unfortunately, Axel was unable to join us today because he's working in Royaumont, near Paris with composers at this very minute. And this is all very challenging because Paris is also not the place one should be at the moment in terms of being a high risk area. But these are all the challenges we're all dealing with at the moment. But going back to the collaboration with Dylan, I found it very stimulating to know that somebody has taken an oboe and been taking just one or two fingerings and really bringing these fingerings to a different form, sending me the material, I'm trying it out, sending him direct feedback. Maybe we need to adjust slightly some of these passages. I think it would be nice if I could maybe, Dylan, if you agree, play maybe just the first 4 bars of this piece and what kind of techniques this piece involves.
Yeah, that's fine for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, maybe Dylan, you would like to just talk about, you know, how you came about this and how we, you know, what all this involved.
Yeah, so I think it's important to when you're extending an instrument beyond its usual playing range. I think it's important to think about the intention of why you're doing it, of why you're extending the techniques. And so the reason initially to use those sounds, which I don't know if it transfers through the through Zoom very well, but they're quite fragile, delicate sounds, almost viola-like. Do you think, Peter? So,
oh, I would definitely say that. As I say, I'm not sure either whether this transports through Zoom that well. Some of these sounds can get so quiet and so delicate. Of the various different tone colors, this kind of thing too. And this kind of sound.
Yeah, so I think people would be struck that they're quite un-oboe-like in many ways. It's not the usual stable kind of penetrating sound that you're used to with an oboe. So that what I wanted to do was to discover sounds that did have a vanishing point and an instability to them, and also to invert the expectation of having like a high melodic instrument with an alto sort of more subdued instrument, so that the viola actually entangles and encapsulates the oboe. So the oboe is kind of like the interior of what the viola is doing. So the viola actually has scordatura, so down to an A on the C string. So it brings it much more into the bass register. And it, like I said, it sort of, hopefully in reality, it is like an envelope around the oboe.
Yeah, see, I would like to also play one. So some of these, of course, some of the timbre fingerings and double harmonics and specialized things in this piece, of course, I'm familiar with because I've written about them. But because Dylan took the trouble of really taking an oboe and maybe taking just one of these fingerings and basically further developing just one fingering for it to go into other places, I thought is an absolute ideal way of dealing with this. And because of the length of time, I mean, for me, the longer the length of time one can take to further develop things like this, the more chances one has of coming into most interesting territory. Here's another example of basically what's a fingering for a high E flat, but is used with various embouchure combinations to create something different. Sorry, wrong thing. I'll play that once more. As I say, some of these things will be a bit difficult to be heard over the internet, but it's the extending of fingerings and the search for different things. Like this fingering is the same fingering as, almost the same fingering as for the high E flat. And the other close fingering that occurs from there, I think is a most interesting combination. And another example is this fingering. And I think the research that we were able to do on, I think one could say it's basically there's about five or six sort of root fingerings in this piece, right? That you further developed and into other multiphonics. That's one of them is this one. Which is a special fingering for a C sharp. Another one with the E flat. This one. Another one is based on this fingering also of C sharp. And a number of double harmonics, which are the very soft diads possible on the oboe, taking fingerings in the middle register. Can you tell us more about your choice that you made, Dylan, of these?
One thing that struck me watching you do those, and it confirms the reason why I hired the oboe. So when you look at strings, especially, you can see all the tactile connection that makes the sound. But with wind instruments, everything, much of it is hidden inside your mouth. So that was another reason to try these myself, to manipulate things and to change the envelope of the sounds. But what you mentioned about is building more or less upon 6 different fingerings. So the piece has sort of circles over these those fingerings, but with variations on the fingers. So they represented a wide range of timbre and of pitch. And so that was the reason for choosing those 6 in particular, and they all have quite a large dynamic range, I think. Maybe some more than others, but that was also important that they could vanish. And so that they become the building block. I mentioned earlier that they become the building block of the vertical sound world, so the harmony, but also the physical change as well that happen in the oboe part. So they sort of like the germs for the rest of.
Just something like you mentioned that because of these kind of limitation, should I call limitation in collaboration, does it actually help you to focus more on smaller materials and then find ways to grow from those smaller numbers of materials? Does it help in that way?
Yeah, it did. I think composers will probably realize this as they age. Actually, the more limitations you have when you're working actually really enables you to have a starting point and to have a trajectory for what you're working with. So if you don't have any of those, I mean, it's really impossible to start, I think.
Do you think? Sorry.
No, you.
I'm just asking is there anything that is lost in connection between you and Peter? Was there anything that when you communicate and then it got lost? Instead of lost in translation, but it's lost in connection with this kind of technology?
Well, we spoke yesterday, but we didn't have the video on, and I realized watching you, it's a completely different experience because you can actually see the physical exertion, and that somehow alters the way that I heard it. Actually, so that I found that there was something lacking yesterday. Maybe having that. I don't normally want to put listening as an adjunct to seeing, but yeah, I realized that when I was watching you, Peter, it kind of completed the picture somehow, with the sonic picture as well.
Yeah, it was quite interesting yesterday. We worked on we worked actually through the whole piece yesterday, again.
Yeah.
But without video, because for some reason it wasn't convenient yesterday for you to be using your laptop, so it was by phone. Yeah, that was. I think the physical aspect of some of the oboe techniques, to actually see them is a very interesting point. Actually, it's one thing to be listening to something and to not see the physical part of what it means for your embouchure, or what it means for pressure, or what it means for all the different things that one is doing. I can see that part too.
And I think noticing you breathing or not breathing sort of suspends the perception of a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So the oboe is very, like we know, it's very good at connecting these long lines without hardly breathing. So I think
in this case, would you be giving any suggestions for any musicians or composer who might want to collaborate using this kind of medium? Do you have any suggestions for them before we're hearing from Dr. Yona Bass about his also experience of collaborating this as well? Any last word from you, Peter and Dylan?
Well, I think I can only say that it works extremely well. And I mean, I have used this medium in the past, also before COVID-19. But I think to to be using it much more. One learns a lot more as to how one can use it, how I can get very close and show exact fingerings, how one can switch off the presets involved with the software you're using that cuts out soft things or loud things, knowing also how to use it, using sometimes headphones and sending maybe delicate things in advance that need to be maybe heard in a different way. But I can only say use it. It is a fantastic medium, but will of course never completely replace being able to work live with somebody.
Yeah. How about Dylan?
Yeah, I think it's with the technology, it's about mitigating the limitations as much as possible. I think when I started off, the sound quality wasn't very good, and so I've come to a series of realizations as time has gone by. So we're very fortunate to be in the time that we live in, to have this technology to connect. But I think that's my advice, to come to terms with the limitations of the technology and try your best to get the quality as good as possible.
Okay, so thank you very, very much, Peter and Dylan, for sharing experience. We'll be actually looking forward to hear your the performance of this piece, which I expect is going to happen online, isn't it? So
yes, it will.
It's going to be a different experience for the audience to hear a premiere of the piece, not in a live concert, but as an online concert. So that's yet another discussion we should have after this, after you have all these kind of premiere things on. So thank you, both of you. And then hope you are really good luck with the piece and future collaborations as well. So thank you.